Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Bank of the West is offering the 1% for the Planet checking account. It gives back to the planet at no cost to you, and there's no monthly service charge with any deposit per statement. Only from Bank of the West. Learn more at bankofthewest.com/1%. Additional conditions apply. Member FDIC.
The Bachelorette and Friends. From first love to happy ever after.
What's that?
From dating to dick pics.
Oh my. Oh no!
The Bachelorette and Friends. Oh, I love a good dick.
This podcast contains sexual references, coarse language, and adult themes from the beginning and throughout. It is not recommended for listeners under the age of 15.
Hello and welcome to the Bachelorette and Friends. I'm your host, Carla Anita Matiazzo. And today's guest is a teacher, a traveller, a karaoke hogger, and comedian. Welcome to the podcast, Miss SaMia.
Hi! I love the introduction. I feel like I should get a round of applause. I felt like I just came out onto stage. It's amazing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on. This is going to be a good conversation. I'm so glad Craig got us in contact. I'm excited.
I know. I was so excited when he let me know about the idea, because he was just like, look, I don't really know the first thing about dating in this generation. I'm not really sure what I would say to her. Like, how would you feel about it? And I was like, I'm probably the most highly experienced. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk to her. So that was a cool link.
Yeah, it was lovely. All right, let's start at your first crushes. Can you remember your first crush and the story around that?
Can I remember my very first crush? Yes, I absolutely can. And it's also a very interesting story, which I'll go into later. He was a guy that I worked with at one of my very first jobs at Hungry Jack's in England. And I was the cashier and he was a boy that was like flipping the burgers at the back. I was 15 years old. And I remember walking in and I remember him looking at me and me looking at him, and he had like dropped the bread buns and there was this like instant spark and instant chemistry. It was so ridiculous. I think that was the first time I ever felt like hormones kind of stir up and, you know, I kind of developed like how it feels to really have the feels for a boy, I guess, because he wouldn't have been older than 16. And we never actually dated. We just had, that was where my beginning of like a fixation, I guess, occurred. And I had put him on a pedestal and created a whole relationship in my head. Like I used to write like his name and my name all over my school folders, dream about him, write about him in my diary. But I think all along he had a girlfriend. You know, and the thing is, but he would still flirt with me, and that was my first ever like fixation on a guy. And I suppose you could say it started off on the wrong foot. Like my very first crush was a bit of a player, and it kind of all just went downhill from there.
Oh no! So would you say then that has been a pattern in what you've been attracted to with men? The player?
Oh, absolutely, Carla. I think I have been very highly influenced by like the media, the music, the movies, the kind of essentially like urban culture that I have fed into ever since I would say even before high school.
Yeah.
And there is that sort of I'm really into my hip hop and my R&B and, you know, the sort of, I would say, like urban movies, urban influences, and they do have a way of pedestaling the man that knows how to talk, and the man that has the swag, and the man that has the struggle, and the man that has the depth. So, you know, essentially, even if their framework of who they are isn't necessarily a highly valued man, if they know how to talk the talk. And I'm a very, I think I would say I'm a very like intellectual, not intellectual person, that makes me sound up myself. I mean, like, I'm attracted to people that can intellectually stimulate me.
Yes.
And those type of guys definitely can. So yeah, it actually started from my very first crush. So it's bizarre when you really think about it.
It is, isn't it? So from that first crush, did you have any high school relationships, and what were the lessons that you learned from the high school relationships?
Do you know what? I was actually a very, very late bloomer. So in high school, I was working at Hungry Jack's, and I had this fixation on this man at work that I'm telling you about, who was my first crush, who I never, ever dated, essentially. And in high school, I was friends with the boys a lot, and I was very much the class clown. That's where, you know, I was always the one that made everybody laugh. I was always the one that the boys loved being friends with, but I wasn't the, you know, I wasn't the beautiful, sexy, typical, you know, the one or two girls in the school that all the boys wanted to go for. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that kind of impacted my self-esteem from like a pretty young age, because I was never, in high school anyway, the desirable one.
Right.
And so I bloomed into it, and university was where I actually had my first proper relationship with a guy.
So how did that happen? Who seduced who wooed who? How did that all happen?
God, if I tell you my stories about the men I've dated, like, it's actually just none of them has a happy ending, or they're not really sweet. You know, like I want it to be a little bit more fairy tale like than it ended up being. I met this guy. I was about 19, and I met him at a club, and that was when, you know, we first started going clubbing, and we were really enjoying our independence and freedom, like as young kids. And we just like, I think, just made out at a club and ended up dating over the course of like a year and a half. And he was like my first everything. But he also ended up having a relationship overseas with a girl the whole time. And it wasn't even the whole time. It was he had been dating her for about 4 years. He was a lot older, actually. He was about 4 years older than me. Yeah. So the pattern started extremely young. Like, it started from 15, my very first crush, to, you know, my very first boyfriend, who kind of reaffirmed that role of like a man would never really quite love, commit, and want to be with all of me. And like what I was attracted to and what I was, you know, always falling for and going for was like the player, the hard to tame, the, you know, the one that could talk the talk. And what was so bad, and I still have it up until today, although I can recognize my patterns of behavior, is that I have this connotation asserted with the nice guy being the boring guy, you know, and the guy that's the, you know, challenge, you know, the one that, you know, makes your heart skips 10 beats, is the one that I want. And to me personally, it's just like a challenge for him to also want me, which most of the time, if not all of the time, ends up happening. But from the start, they have a million red flags, and they were never ready to commit or want to be with me, or, you know, they're not lying about who they are, but somehow I get into it, into the relationship somehow. And I think that by me giving and doing and being, is going to change them. And I'm going to be the girl that's going to change them. And it's a really, not sick, I don't want to criticize myself that much, but it's a really, really weird pattern of behavior that I adopted from when I was essentially 15. Like somehow being quite highly valued and ethical, it's very strange in most, if not all areas of my life. When it comes to dating men, that seems to be the one thing where even if they have a girlfriend, I don't leave on the first. Do you know what I mean? So
I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's the whole self-worth stuff feeds into that dialogue, I think. I think we are so indoctrinated as women because we are the nurturers, because we are the ones, the vessels that bring children into the world. We innately are the nurturers. And underlying with that sometimes plays into wanting to be the nurturer and the fixer with guys. But something you posted, I think it was you that posted the other day, like they always tell you who they are or what they want from the get-go. They'll tell you straight away.
Always, yeah.
Always. But sometimes we're like, no, they maybe just don't mean that. Or maybe, like, we try and talk ourselves out of believing exactly what they've put out there. Very, very interesting. Yes, what you're saying there, it's a pattern of behaviour that I think we as women have been partly expected to uphold, this nurturing, fixing. Oh, if a guy really loves her, he'll changes who he is to be, a part of her world or whatever. So how did you recognise that pattern?
I have recognised the pattern because I keep attracting the same man in different bodies. And what the craziest thing about it is that 15 years later, it hasn't changed. And the only thing that's really changed now is an incredibly higher sense of self-awareness and accountability about the decisions and choices that I've made. Like this is something that I'm in now and I'm really working on and I'm trying to heal from within that I did not have, not even last year, not even last year, because honestly, Carla, I feel like I've hit rock bottom. Like it's over and over and over again.
It's exhausting.
One of the comments, it's exhausting. And one of the comments I wanted to just add to what you just said prior, but I didn't interject, was we think that we can change them, is what you were saying. But that's because we project our values onto them. Like we think, why wouldn't you want to have a happy, passionate, beautiful, healthy, loving relationship, which is what I'm here willing to offer you? Yeah. Of course I'm going to change your mind because we think that people want exactly what we want, and unfortunately some people are just not built for committing or relationships because with that comes being vulnerable, with that comes putting your guard down, with that comes accountability, and if you're not willing to do that, how can you be willing to be that? And we always think that we're able to change that, and unfortunately we can't. So for me it has been if I was to write a book, which one day I should, even my first love came back only 2 years ago. I actually I came across him on Tinder, which is a whole different story we have to get into soon. The amount of men that hold dead fish as profile pics on that bloody app.
I don't understand.
And women can look at that and think, oh, he looks very adventurous and skilled.
No, I don't want to see dead fish.
Face,
No. I don't get it.
That's a different story altogether. But anyway, so I came across him on Tinder and We hadn't seen each other in 20 years. And I started playing tricks in my head and my mind that this was the guy. This is what I mean when I say he came back full circle.
Right.
I thought that this was the guy that I had been waiting for, because he was always like my first. Like I think I would have been. I was in love with this guy. I mean, puppy love, obviously, for years in high school. He was my high school crush, my crush that I never was with. And then I met him. I came across him on Tinder. He started messaging me. I tried to play it completely cool. I pretended that I didn't even recognize him. Like, you know, I've got like diary entries of him ever since. Like, I've got his pictures all over, like my room, my wall, my ceiling. When he came over, he was like, "What's got?" No, I'm just joking. Anyway, so we actually ended up meeting up and like dating essentially for a few months. And for those few months, I was on top of the world. You know, I had really thought that this was like fate and destiny and the universe and all of the stuff that, you know, romantic movies and cartoons and Disney have ruined for us, because they make us believe a complete fantasy. And believe it or not, Carla, we ended up having, so we were together for a few months, and it was always a bit shady. It was always kind of, you know, it was never kind of all walls down. But we had spent a whole weekend together and everything was good. And then the following week, he completely ghosted me. And there was no explanation. There is an explanation. It came later, but it was, I kid you not. I was with him for a few months. I was devastated. No calls, no messages. He had spent 3 nights here. Everything was good. And then from the following Tuesday, I could not get in touch with him at all. And he had just gone completely ghost, no explanation. And that was my very first ghosting experience by someone. And what that did. No, it's not nice. And it happens to the best of us, you know, and what the woman does is they blame themselves. That's what they do. It's always my fault. I wasn't pretty enough. Maybe I said this, or maybe I did that. And I replayed every single night, the last weekend that we had spent together, over and over again in my head. What that had done to my self-esteem was highly damaging. Like, I don't think you can, I was essentially used and abused and just like pushed to the side and spat on the ground, like with no regard. But what you realize with ghosting is that, you know, it really isn't even about you. It's about their inability. And, you know, the fact that he couldn't even have a conversation with me speaks volumes about how damaged he is. And what's so insane is that I found out 6 months later that he had actually gone to jail.
What the fuck?
Yes. There's the story. So for the 6 months I was in agony, and, you know, thought the whole time it was me. And that was such a big learning lesson for me. He was actually on trial during the period that we had, that we were sort of dating, you could say. And he never told me, ever.
What?
And I guess and it was for like, this is what's crazy. It was for drugs and breaking and entering. And I had found out this through friends of friends, and that to me it literally wiped the wind off my sails, because then I started really analyzing the choices that I made. You know, the time tattoos being in jail all over his body didn't give me any indication that he might be a bit shady. Or
What are they?
You know,
I don't understand. What are those tattoos? What do they look like? What do you mean?
Oh, they're like Roman numerals on like fingers, like on like the finger things that indicates that you've done time in jail. Like those kind of. Well, exactly. Neither did I. And, I remember one time I was making pizza and I told him, I was like, oh, babe, can you please bring some Coke over? And, this is when we just first started dating. Mm-hmm. And I just said, because I wanted dessert and I wanted Coke with my pizza or whatever. And he came into the house and I'm like, where's the bottle of Coke and the cans? Or like, I thought maybe he left it in the car or whatever. And he just comfortably walks over to my table, takes out a couple of rocks and just starts chopping it, and I'm like, that wasn't the Coke I was talking about. Like,
fuck.
Do you know what? Yeah. And this is the thing. I ignored that red flag as well. Like, you just think.
Yeah, right.
What was I thinking? It's he was the one that seemed shocked to me that I didn't specify Coca-Cola. I was like, that wasn't the Coke that I meant. And he was like, well, what Coke did you mean? And I'm like, the drink. And he goes, well, why didn't you say Coca-Cola? And I'm like, what? Yeah. But I feel, yes. Sure. I'm ashamed.
But you shouldn't, though. That's his behaviour. You shouldn't be ashamed of that. That's his behaviour, manipulating you and projecting onto you to make you feel bad for something that was clearly, he knew what he was doing. He was testing you to see how you'd respond to him bringing drugs into the house.
Exactly. So, I mean, again, you always kind of just essentially blame yourself, don't you?
Yeah,
you just, even then, yeah. So that was my big learning lesson with full circle of my first crush coming back and ending up being a total pick.
If he had told you that he was on trial and that he might go to jail, how do you think you would have responded to that?
Do you know, look, if I had to be honest, I don't know whether or not there would have been a romanticism about it.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
That's being honest. Like, I'm like, I hate to, say that because it makes me feel so sick inside. But, there's that, but he was my first ever love and look at him being vulnerable with me and he wants me to take on that journey. And honestly, Carla, I'm so weak when it comes to thinking with my brain, when it comes to this kind of.
It's hard, isn't it? But it's really easy to get into the trap of him going to jail and romanticizing it because we see it so much in movies. We see it so much in movies.
The real issue is where the fuck was my self-esteem and self-worth that I, even up until seeing all the red flags and even after hearing about what had actually happened and how much of a coward he was and how dodgy he was and how dangerous that situation was where I was allowing this man into my home and God knows what he could have done. Like, when I really think about the logical and I move the fantasy aspect of it, why did I even allow that in? And how did I even think, where I feel like the real issue is my lack of self-worth.
Yep.
Because, honestly, Carla, I keep doing it and it's really hard for me to accept this, but, it's a very difficult period for me at the moment because I'm really doing a lot of self-work on this and I'm acknowledging it because I'm repeating this type of behavior. What's so interesting is I think from the outset, I appear to be a very strong and very confident woman. And in so many areas of my life, I have demonstrated, without sounding up myself, success, right? I'm functional and successful in my job as a teacher. I'm functional and successful with my finances. I'm functional and successful in entertainment, which it takes a lot of guts and balls to be able to juggle so many. And from the outset, there's plenty of people that probably think she's got high standards, but when it comes to men and when it comes to dating, it's the one area that has been the complete demise and also the core of a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety over the years in my life, which has taken away a lot of just happiness and fulfillment, you know? And so now for me, when I said I really feel like I've hit rock bottom, I'm fed up. If I don't acknowledge the accountability, the part that I play in this, then, you know, it really is no one else's fault but me. And the biggest work is my self-love. And there's a fucking huge gap in that. I can tell you that. And there's a lot of reasons why I feel the way I feel about myself. And unfortunately, it stems back to family and, you know, parental trauma bonds from when we were younger. I'm a, you know, Muslim, Bangladeshi ethnic female in my mid-30s that is single and probably living completely different to what my parents wanted me to be, you know, and to always feel that level, like that gap of disappointment from like the people you love the most and want the acknowledgement the most, you know, it's a very, very, very debilitating thing. And I don't know if partly because I was told what to do when I was younger and what success and happiness looked like, which was a husband and kids by 21, I went the complete opposite way and I self-sabotaged and I only went for men that confirmed that I wasn't good enough and was going to be like absolute 100% certain failure from the start. Like these weren't men I was ever going to have a potential successful, healthy relationship with. And so that was this cycle, this vicious cycle that kept affirming my self-limiting belief. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I don't meet the mark. So I keep attracting and keep going towards people that do that. Does that make sense?
Oh, you are speaking so much truth that I can completely relate to, especially in regards to value and self-worth. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing all that. I really appreciate it. I know the people listening will really take away a lot from that, especially, look, the ethnics. I'm Italian, French and Croatian. So I know oh too well about the expectations of generations gone before us of what they think a woman is worth by who they are attached to or what they're attached to or whatever it is. So speaking on that experience, my nonna on my mum's side was very much about the old school, you are not worthy unless you are married, unless you have kids. I'm not married. I don't have children. So, and I'm in my mid-30s. And it's interesting though, my dad's side, my nonna Anna, she came to Australia, in her mid-20s. So that's quite late. You would think that a woman that comes to Australia from Italy in her late 20s would be the same as my other nonna, very traditional, very, you've only got worth if you're attached to a man. She was the opposite. She was like Carla. Whenever I'd introduce her to a boy, she'd be like, no, he's not good enough for you. It's not good enough for you. She was like the opposite. So it was really hard to reconcile those two, even though they're both from Italy. Both my grandmothers were from Italy. It was very hard to reconcile what worth is, what my worth is when I was getting polar opposites from both my nonnas. But then on my mum's side, who was telling me I didn't have any worth because I wasn't married and didn't have kids, and she literally would not have photos of me as an adult around the house because I was not married. So only grandchildren that were married with children or just married had their photos around her house. And she would say to me, oh, when you get married, I'll put your photo up. Like, really? Okay. So having to deconstruct that and not even realize it's a thing subconsciously until you're older and you recognize the patterns that you are attracting because we have been indoctrinated to believe that we are not worth anything if we're single. It's very difficult, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, one thing I've learned is I'm trying to now stop, like, I'm trying to take away the blame.
Mm-hmm.
I also understand that it's a generational and also a cultural thing, because for so many years, I have been so angry. I've been so angry that my sister's been married and she's been given, tens of thousands of dollars of gold and jewelry, and all of the big fusses have been made over her. And, that has caused so many various complexities, even within our relationship, but she's gotten married and had her kids, which is beautiful and, wonderful. And I'm very much involved in their lives. They're incredible, but it's just like, whereas meanwhile, I've gone and lived in 3 different countries all by myself. I got my master's. I bought my own home. I've learnt languages. I've done comedy. Which is also, I feel. I'm not saying that it's one or the other. We shouldn't celebrate marriage and we shouldn't celebrate family.
I know what
and
you're saying. Yeah.
Celebrate a woman having children. But what about everything else? And literally always almost begging for that acknowledgement from my parents, going, look, I got my master's.
Yeah, okay. Look what I did.
Now you need to find a man.
Yeah.
And I remember like, it's a funny story, and I make a lot of my comedy out of like probably inner hurts. But I remember when I first moved into my house, and my dad came over with my mum, and he was just like, it's very good that you acquired real estate, but now you need to acquire a husband. And I'm just like, are you fucking joking? Like, are you going to come into the house and have a look at how beautiful my home is, which I built on it just comes out. It's not because they're trying to hurt us or, my mum walked in as if like she came in from a funeral because I didn't have a partner. And believe it or not, she went over. I had an Indian guy that lived next door who happened to be an Uber driver. I don't make these generalizations up. It just happened.
Yeah.
Okay. But he was single. This is so mortifying. And she had gone to his house. He lives next door. Gone to his house, knocked on his door, and actually let him know that I had moved in next door. I'm a teacher. I have a master's. I'm single. If there's make sure you look after her. I think that's what she actually said to him. And this is someone I've never met. And for 4 years, he's now moved out, thank God. But for 4 years, every time I walk past my house, I know that he thought that I wanted in, and I was just embarrassed every single time because it was just humiliating. But, again, you have to laugh about it, right, Carla? You can't be like,
because I used to be a teacher. I moved to the country for one of my teaching stints, and my dad came over to help me move and all that kind of stuff. And one of the days I was setting up my classroom or whatever, and one of the teachers come in, and my dad's like, make sure you look after my daughter. This is my workplace. This is my workplace. What are you doing? So when that teacher left, I was like, Dad, this is my workplace. I'm an equal to that person. I'm not a child. I don't need looking after. Don't be doing that. He's like, oh, he understands. He's a dad. I'm like, no, not the point. Not the point. You're embarrassing me. Stop it. Yeah.
Make sure you look after my daughter.
I'm like, this is my workplace. What are you doing? Like, very embarrassing.
Yeah, a lot of common ground there. But as I said, I'm learning to understand that they're also doing the best that they can. And they've done the best that they can. I mean, for goodness sake, my parents came from Bangladesh. My dad was in his 40s. Yeah. They were. It's incredible that they but that I was able to think for myself as independently as I did, considering our circumstances. But I think also that need for acknowledgement and that need for validation also was the core reasons of why I went on to probably a more downhill, I want to say trajectory, but that's contradicting the word, but downhill path when it comes to men. Because as I said to you, I think it's just, I don't know how I would be, especially now in my mid-30s, having done so much. I mean, I've essentially been single for almost 10 years.
Yep.
I have had casual relationships all the way through, Carla, where I've been great friends with them. I've had obviously the benefits of all of being in a relationship, companionship wise, physically, etc. But a lot of these men have also taught me or have normalized, as soon as I care or show emotion or want something more, they're ready to leave. And what's really interesting is when I'm the one that cuts it, especially with the guy that I'm seeing now. And this is where I went, oh, I am still doing the same thing. Also with the situation with the guy that I'm seeing now, it's like, as soon as I'm done, you want to call me every night and have all the benefits of an emotional companionship where I'm validating you and making you feel good about yourself. But then you can't be consistent enough to want to see me on the weekends or make a little bit of effort for me without freaking out because you've got your own dilemmas and issues and self-work that you're not willing to acknowledge. So I ended it and only a few weeks ago, and then what does he do? It's that romantic sweeping action of showing up at my door, and you're just kind of you reel back into, but what about when I'm telling you that I want to see you and I want to be a little bit more consistent. I don't necessarily want a relationship with you, but this is just one guy. Most of the men in the 10 years that I have been single and have had casual, I've always had relationships, but they've always been casual relationships. It's very similar. They've normalized not caring and being detached, and that's what they're really attracted to. So that in a really strange way, I do it even more. But so we're connecting, but we've never been more disconnected ever.
I understand.
So you've got the physical, connection, and you feel really validated and desired, but then you turn around and you're sleeping and you're just feeling empty and completely worthless inside, because when you want to give your love and you want to commit and you want to include them and be vulnerable, they don't want it. But at any point or at any sign when I'm walking away and I'm completely done, it's very strange. It's like a chase mentality. They all come back, and every single one, I'm telling you, I'm not even making this up, every single one has, for me, every single one. So it's safe to say I'm not the problem, but I'm a fucking huge problem because I keep attracting these type of men. So, yeah.
I wouldn't say that you're a problem. I would just say you need to love yourself better. That's all. To not allow the pattern to keep happening.
I know, but what does that mean?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
What does that mean?
Does that actually mean?
Yeah, because we hear it all the time, don't we? And I guess what I've learned from that is once I started working out that I have value and worth irrespective of my marital status, I stopped accepting certain behaviours, or as soon as I saw a red flag, I addressed it immediately and was actually vocal irrespective of what the consequence was. Because in the past, if I saw a red flag, I would dance around it and try and be the one to make things really easy for the other person and to not cause a fuss and to make everything just all delightful. And I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't say that I wasn't happy with whatever was happening. Whereas now, if I see something,
Wow.
I'll say something. And that's
And if
changed
you
a lot of stuff.
And if you say something and they don't change or rectify their behavior or address it, do you stay still?
No.
Oh, you really don't?
No. I'll give 3 chances usually.
Right. Okay.
And look, some things happen sometimes, emergencies happen, especially if you're dating with somebody that has children. You have to be more flexible there. But on the whole, if there's a red flag and I address it and the response has either been shit or they've said they'll rectify the behaviour and they don't, then I'm just like, look, I don't think we're just not compatible, or this isn't, I don't think I'm the right woman for you. Like, yeah.
And you can cut it.
Yeah. There's been a couple of times where, because I was single for 7 years, so similar, and throughout that time I dated.
Yeah.
And only 1 or 2 guys got past like the first couple of dates, and we dated for a couple of months or whatever. And there was one guy that there was one guy that treated me really poorly. And I kept allowing that and kept going back to that and believing that he'd change his behavior because other stuff was happening in my life that was a reflection of I wasn't worth anything better. So I allowed that to keep happening. And that was a subconscious thing. Like, I genuinely wanted to believe that his behavior would change. But then once I started to address the other things that were happening in my life and working through my own self-worth and actually looking at that relationship, or not relationship, but that situation for what it was, I was like, yeah, this is not healthy. I can't do this anymore. And then that was that.
Very interesting. Yeah. Do you think maybe there's the teacher in us, or maybe just the woman and teacher in us that sees the potential in someone?
I think that's an interesting point you've made, because we are so, as teachers, very much there to support and help young people find who they are, give them the opportunity to make the mistakes, but learn from the mistakes, make sure that, you know, they're moving forward. I think there's something there that does make us maybe a bit too forgiving in relationships.
Yes.
I've got plenty of friends that don't want to have kids, and I think that's fine. I don't think that that's them going against what they really want or who they really are, just because biologically speaking, our bodies are built to reproduce. Yeah, it's a tricky, tough subject to tackle, because I guess it's up to the individual at the end of the day and the partnership that they have with their significant other. We are still very much expected to follow suit with that, especially culturally. I don't know. There are definite days where I think, oh, I'd really love to be a mum. And there are definite days where I'm like, yeah, nah, I'm good, I'll pass.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's ever evolving, I think. I don't know. That's a really tough one.
But the problem is that the values that you require to be able to, manifest or actualize that vision and dream of having a family and having a healthy relationship, those values, we've moved very far away from those values in the dating era and the dating generation that we're in. So that's, does that make sense?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to, like, so, you know, being loyal, not having choice with like 500 different filtered photos of women with their asses and titties hanging out, you know, men not direct messaging like simultaneous women, like, you know, so like, you know, 5 or 6 at a time. Like, you just, now we're at a generation where you can have sex, you know, you can give that away like pancakes, but you can't, like, to hold hands with someone or asking the question of what are we is the biggest, it's the scariest, most petrifying thing you can imagine. Whereas in before, you know, you had the home phones and you were talking to 1 or 2 and one person at a time, and, you know, you put in the effort and like, I don't know, because like, honestly, like dating, I mean, I don't know how else to do it but to do it online, and being on apps like Tinder and like Plenty of Fish or whatever you want to call it, it's a fucking jungle. And it's just exhausting. And more often than not, it's just disappointing, and it doesn't feel organic and it doesn't feel authentic. And we don't trust, and we don't have anything sacred, and we don't have like that beautiful, like, I don't know. I just find I really don't know. And if I'm not on dating apps, how else am I going to meet someone? I actually don't know if I want to actualize that. I just feel like there's so many roadblocks in for me to ultimately achieve that I don't know. I hate to say this, but I feel like part of me's just given up.
It's hard, isn't it? There was that, yeah, I can relate to the giving up as well. It's definitely the whole online dating.
Yeah.
Exactly like you said, it's a jungle, it's a minefield. There's a lot of disrespect on there. There's a lot of bullshit on there. In the 7 years that I was single, I went on and off it, and I could only ever last maybe 2 or 3 days, because it just used to make me feel shit. I just used to feel like the conversations were always really boring, or if there was a date that eventuated out of it, nobody was ever who they said they were. And there was no connection with anyone. I just got exhausted and sick and tired of it. So I was just like, and the amount of dick pics, I just couldn't, it was just too much. It was just too much. I just didn't. What do you
mean? See, that's so different how people have such different experiences. Like with online dating with you would have guys send you dick pics.
Yeah. So we, like, literally, the conversation would not even be sexual. There'd be no sexual, would not be sexual. Within the first maybe half an hour of conversation, I had probably up in the on and off times that I was on online dating over 7 years, probably about 8 dicks, and roughly. And there was one guy that I remember in particular, and he was early on me trying online dating, because online dating came, like the apps came about when I was in my longest relationship. So I was on them later, like I hadn't experienced them. So when I started trying them, I remember in the early stages when I was still trying to work them all out, one guy sending me like multiple, like he just kept sending them. And I blocked that person. But at the start, when he first sent one, I was like, what are you sending me? I don't want any of this. Like, I was very clear to not send that stuff. And then I remember in one of the pictures that he did send, there was one that had a red bow, like around. I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? What are you actually wanting?
Happy birthday, Mama.
Like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, I just don't, unless you are just looking for a fuck, I don't understand.
I attract convicts and you attract dick pics. Together we make the perfect man.
That's pretty funny.
Do you think a woman can genuinely have friends with benefits, or like an F-buddy situation where...
I've never been able to handle it. I've never been able to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because sooner or later, somebody gets attached. Sooner or later. Yeah. Because I feel like I could, because I think the reason why it got a little bit messy with the person now is because we hadn't really set that healthy boundaries. We were kind of talking every night, all of the benefits, like I said, of a relationship. You're building that emotional connection, and on top of that, you're being physically intimate. It's not really a friend, but you know, the label is friends with benefits. God, no, it's not a relationship. You know, I can't handle that, you know, according to him or whatever. Like so there was very blurred lines. But now that I've kind of taken a little bit of a step back from it, you know, I think I can, to be honest. I think I can, because strangely, I get bits and pieces from there are quite a few men in my life. I don't mean in like a romantic way. I just mean there are quite a lot of, there's actually a few, there's multiple good, strong, consistent men in my life that are in different forms. One's overseas, one's interstate, one's, you know, my really good friend, one's, you know, they're kind of everywhere. And I get little bits, even like my ex-boyfriend, I'm extremely close to, and I actually spend a lot of time with him. He's here. So, you know, we actually spend time together and talk on the phone. So I get a little bit of a, you know, like the physical companionship there, the emotional companionship there, the not like, you know, like the desirable companionship where I'm feeling very desired by that guy, you know. So I feel like when there's not one, a woman or a person is able to put their one in a few that make up that one. And I think that you could have friends with benefit situation if you do really know that this isn't going to eventuate into a relationship. However, it becomes very dangerous when it's for a long period of time and it becomes very comfortable and you're stopping yourself from being with other people, or at least putting yourself out there or dating other people. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think it's all up to, really, if you're being true to yourself on what you want and sticking to your belief system, boundaries, making sure that you're safe and that you're getting your needs met, then I don't see the issue with any of that.
If I'm really X, Y, and Z, and I have all of this love to give, then why am I still single? And why is no one, you know, like, not no one, because that's not the reality. As we discussed, there's been plenty of men that
it can feel like that.
Still can feel like why is the people that I want don't want me, whereas it seems so easy for everybody else, because we're living in a fucking like mirage that is just a mirage of reality, which is actually probably just a mirage of complete bullshit and fiction. You know, I'm like, you're only posting your best everything every single day. You know how it's so funny, sometimes I feel sad about my life and I go on my own social media and I'm like, damn, she looked good, oh, she's got a good life, and I don't even like realize it's me that's like depressed about my own shit, and I'm looking at my own profile. That's how much disconnect there is from like the reality of it. So, you know, if you're doing it to yourself, like imagine how many people are, doing it to like others by comparing themselves constantly, particularly as women, you know, and men, probably more so prevalent in men, because we don't really talk about our struggles and we don't really share, you know, what we're battling. And we, you know, it's not the perfect, you know, like, yes, my sister has 3 beautiful children and she has a very healthy relationship with a very good man, but you don't think that they have struggles and that they haven't been sleeping for the last 5 years and that it takes a ridiculous and enormous amount of work to make a marriage work? Like, it's just, this comparison like mentality has really ruined it for us, and it's just something that really needs to be addressed. And if you're not conscious or aware of it, it can be very damaging. I try to catch myself now, but you know, I still do it. We're hypnotized to wake up in the morning and scroll. You know, we're hypnotized. It's like how we drive. You do it subconsciously, so you don't realize what you're feeding yourself. So I try not to compare myself. I still do to other people. Yeah,
it's hard not to.
Yes,
it's really hard not to. Really hard not to.
Yeah.
So the final question I have to ask before I love and leave you: what is the biggest lesson you have learnt as an adult throughout your dating experiences? What's the biggest thing that has popped out to you as the biggest lesson?
That's a really good question. I think for me, because my dating life has been such a roller coaster, and, you know, I have put so much weight into men over the last essentially like 20 years of my dating life, that when things are good, everything else in my life is really good, you know, and then when things go into shit, you know, so it's almost been like a manic, like, you know, putting all the weight on, because I've put so much weight on my dating or on my validation from a man, it's domino affected into other areas of my life as in extreme waves as it has. And my biggest takeaway has been that the only thing that is permanent and consistent is impermanence. So you're extenuating, your circumstances are always going to change, and dating is going to be one of them. Like, you know, you could be the perfect guy and he can change his mind, or you can change your mind. So my biggest takeaway has been, honestly, nobody is going to make you happy but yourself, and the work really, really needs to be done within you to realize that you have it all within you. The whole world is inside you. Like, I have the ability to live a very fulfilled and a very purposeful life, if I could find that and develop all the areas and, like, you know, heal the traumas and heal the work that needs to be done just by being me and contributing, and, you know, not to put this much pressure on that one area of my life, because that's probably the only area of my life that's gone so up and down and affected, you know, in consequence, my happiness. And I just, honestly, Carla, I just cannot do this anymore. I can't keep going up and down. So I hope that makes sense, that, you know, ultimately it falls within me. And even if I do meet the perfect man, it may or may not happen if the framework of who I am and the foundation of who I am is not happy or fulfilled. No one is going to be able to change that for me.
That's a very, very good point. I think it is so important for both people in a relationship to be content within themselves, and then anything extra externally is a delightful surprise and extra awesome because we are already fulfilled and happy within ourselves. I think that's a great message to end on. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been brilliant. It's been an excellent conversation. So grateful that you came on today.
Oh, thank you so much, Carla, for having me. I really appreciate it.
The Catchalorette with friends near and far, from heartache to catfish and sex toys. The Catchalorette and friends. See you next time if you dare.
Bank of the West is offering the 1% for the Planet checking account. It gives back 1% of the account's net revenue to the planet at no cost to you. There's no monthly service charge with any deposit per statement, and there's no minimum balance required. The 1% for the Planet checking account, only from Bank of the West. Learn more at bankofthewest.com/1%. Additional conditions apply. Member FDIC.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.